the last thing that we did, if I remember correctly, it was Bnei Tzlofchad, the daughters of Tzlofchad, and their claim, and Moshe wasn't sure what was supposed to be, so he asked the Kodesh Baruch Hu. And then the laws of inheritance are given out over here, because it's not clear up until then. It's not clear whether daughters do inherit or whether they don't inherit. So over here on page 886, the Torah says that normally what happens is that boys inherit, but if there are no boys, then the girls inherit, and then if there are no boys and there are no girls, then it goes off to the closest relatives in the next ring around. The real question over here is why is all of this being taking place now? One of the things that was done was that there was a nachla that each tribe was given out their portion, and then we found out that Shevet Levi wasn't going to have its own portion in the land of Israel. Why would that be now? What's the importance of having the land of Israel being apportioned out now, as opposed to maybe it would make more sense to go in to conquer the land and then to portion out the land afterwards? So I saw a very interesting idea that normally in inheritances, they normally cause a lot of grief, right? When I don't know. I mean, Mitzvah Hashem, you should never know from these things. But when parents pass away and they leave over their inheritance to their children, so very often it causes all kinds of arguments among the children. I once heard from one of the greatest halachic authorities here in Yerushalayim today, who told me that he has his own Beis Din, and he told me that he has his own court. And he told me that 80% of the cases that come in front of him are to do with inheritances. And he says it makes no difference how big the inheritance is, people are always going to fight. He said it doesn't matter if it's $1,000 or $1 million, it makes no difference. This one's upset that this got that, and this one's upset that that got this, and the whole thing causes a lot of grief. So I once heard from one of the biggest halachic authorities of our generation, that he felt that the very best thing that parents could do was actually to give out their whatever they had in their estate, to give it out before they died. Right? Things of worth, to give them out before they died, in order to make sure that after they died there shouldn't be any fighting that goes on amongst the children, because everything's been given out anyway. There isn't very much left. Where did he learn this from? So I think he learned it from over here. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving out the various portions of the land of Israel, are being given out now in order to make sure that if there are any people who are disgruntled, if there are any people who are upset, that they should get this all sorted out now before they go into the land of Israel, and not afterwards, right? Because once they go into the land of Israel and it all starts taking place over there, then things are going to spiral out of control for sure. He's going to be upset that he got this, and this one got a better piece of land than he got. We spoke about this, I think, on Sunday. We spoke about the idea that each piece of land was given over with divine inspiration to each family and to each and to each tribe, and it means that whatever they've got, that's what they need, and they'll find the blessing inside of the land. Some bits of land have a more obvious blessing to them, and some of them have a less obvious blessing to them, but they've all got a blessing inside of them. That's what needs to be identified over there. And that's why all of this is taking place over here. I once heard from who was it? From Rabbi Yochanan Zweig, I think, in Miami, who said that there was a case in Miami of two brothers that had fallen out with each other over their father's inheritance. The father had left everything to one of the children, and the other child had claimed that his brother had done a number on the father, and he'd made him change his will, and that it wasn't fair, and he was taking him to court. And in the meantime, the combined legal costs of both the brothers had topped $200,000. The whole inheritance that was being spoken about was $200,000. So Rabbi Zweig went to one of the brothers, and he told him, he said, what are you doing? It doesn't make any, at this point it doesn't make any difference. Just make up with each other, because whatever it is that you were going to inherit is going to go off now to the lawyers anyway, into the legal system, and you're not going to get anything from this anyway. So the brother turned around and he says, I don't care whether it costs me another $100,000, but he says, but I'm going to make sure that my brother's not going to get this. That's what happens. People become completely irrational. So what the Torah is telling us over here is to take care of things sooner rather than later. And in order to make sure that if people are upset, maybe they can bring their grievances to the parents at the beginning and say, look, it's not fair. I wanted this and you gave it to him, and I wanted that and you gave it to her, in order to be able to make sure that people are content with what they've got. And then over the page, on page 888, which of course is a terrific page to be on, because it doesn't matter what kind of dyslexia you've got, you cannot go wrong, right? 888, upside down, inside out, back to front. It makes no difference. It's always going to read 888. So what happens over here? Let's have a look and see. We got some interesting things over here. First of all, HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes Moshe Rabbeinu up to the land, up the mountain, in order to be able to see the land of Israel. So the Chofetz Chaim used to say like this, that the Jewish people have had this incredible desire to return to the land of Israel. It's almost like a part of our psyche, it's like something which is difficult to define. So he says, where does it come from? It comes from over here. That even though Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't allowed to go into the land of Israel, but his desire was so great to go into the land of Israel, that desire was passed over to the Jewish people. And that's where the Jewish people have had this continual desire for almost 2,000 years to come back to the land of Israel, to want to be in the land of Israel. It's part of our prayers, right? When we pray towards Jerusalem, and we pray that we should be brought back to Israel. Where is all of this incredible desire? Where's it coming from? It's stemming from over here, where God brings Moshe up. He looks at the land of Israel. According to Chazal, according to the sages, he saw more of the land of Israel from his vantage point over here outside of the land of Israel than Joshua did when he took the Jewish people into the land of Israel, because Joshua didn't manage to conquer everything. And subsequently, Moshe Rabbeinu saw more, which means, I don't know, there's a little something to learn over here, that sometimes we got to recognize the blessings that we've got and see what it is that we have, and stop looking at what we don't have. One of the things that Moshe Rabbeinu did was his ability to be able to absorb the messages from God and to accept what it was that God was giving him, in order to, and that made Moshe Rabbeinu a person who lived a life of contentment. He was very content, very fulfilled with what he had, because he wasn't continuously looking over his shoulder to see what he doesn't have. However, what's interesting is over here, from verse number 15, let's have a look and see. Moshe then approaches HaKadosh Baruch Hu, approaches God, and he says to him like this, Yifkoid Hashem Elokei Ruchois L'chol Bosa Ish Ala Eda. Moshe Rabbeinu knows that he's going to die. And now what is Moshe Rabbeinu doing? He's now asking God to appoint somebody to be the leader of the Jewish people. Now, I don't know if you people realize just how odd that is. Right? Why is that odd? Because Moshe Rabbeinu knows perfectly well that God is not going to leave the Jewish people leaderless. He understands that. He knows that. So what on earth does Moshe imagine when he approaches God and he says that you have to put somebody in charge of he calls it a flock, right? Which means that you need a shepherd to take care of the Jewish people. What do you imagine is going on over here? But let's have a look, because he lays down a few details. He says like this, verse number 17. We need a leader who's going to go out in front of the Jewish people, and he's going to take them out. He's going to bring them back. The Jewish people shouldn't be like a flock that doesn't have a shepherd. What's he saying? So there's a few very, very fundamental lessons that have been given over here. The first one is, the Kotzker Rebbe says something extraordinary over here. He says that Moshe Rabbeinu is praying to God that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of course HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to choose whoever he wants to be the next leader of the Jewish people. But Moshe is saying that whoever you choose, please don't let it be Pinchas. Now again, I don't know if those of you that have been around who Pinchas is. Pinchas, we come across him at the end of last week's portion. We come across him at the beginning of this week's portion. Pinchas is described as being a kanoi. A kanoi is a zealot. Pinchas is the one who, when he sees something terrible taking place between Zimri and the Midianite princess, he goes and he takes his spear and he spears them whilst they're in the midst of having relations with each other, and he brings them outside to show them to everybody. I mean, this Pinchas, he's a very zealous person. Says the Kotzker Rebbe, one of the great Hasidic Rebbes, who was renowned for his very, very sharp insights. Says the Kotzker Rebbe, every society needs its kanoim. Every society needs its zealots. The zealots are the ones who will do whatever needs to be done without thinking twice about it. That just whatever God wants them to do, that's what they'll do. But he says a zealot will make a lousy leader, because the zealots are streets ahead of everybody else. They don't really have any connection with everybody else. Here we see from what Pinchas did, everybody else is standing around and they don't know what to do. And Pinchas is the one who comes along and says, this is the way that we need to do it, and who's going to do it? And Moshe Rabbeinu says, you thought about it, you do it, and off he goes and he does it. A kanoi is somebody, a zealot is somebody who is, by definition, lacking a certain connection with the regular people. The people who can't understand why anything is difficult. Why is it difficult to keep the mitzvahs? Why are you having a problem keeping the mitzvahs, keeping the commandments? It's easy here, you just have to do it, right? And it's difficult for them to relate to everybody else around them. According to the Kotzker Rebbe, Moshe Rabbeinu is saying to God, look, it's very important, leadership is very important, and whoever you decide who is going to be the leader of the Jewish people, then whoever it is, that's great. I'm just asking, from my vantage point, I think that Pinchas should not be the one who's given over the leadership of the Jewish people, because Pinchas is too much of a zealot. So what does Moshe describe? He doesn't mention Pinchas by name. But he says that he should be somebody who goes out with the people, and somebody who comes in with the people, and somebody who's able to relate to the people. There's a very famous fable. The Rav Yitzchak Hutner, one of the greatest rabbis from the last generation, he says like this. He says it a little bit like there was once a town where they decided they were going to put up, they were going to erect a clock in the town centre. So they built a little, a little tower, and they put the clock up on the tower. It wasn't very high. And what happened was all the people came along, and each one looks at his watch and he says, oh, that's the time, but the time on my watch is a little bit different from the time on the clock over there. So he would change the time on the clock on the tower. And every day the clock on the tower was being changed backwards, forwards, up, down. So finally they decided, obviously this is not going to work. So they built a very high tower that nobody could get to, and they put the clock at the top of the tower, which was great because nobody touched the clock. The problem was nobody could see the time either. It was so high up in the air. So what did they do? In the end, they decided that the only option really is to do what? Is to build a tower which is not too high and not too low, to put the clock up in a position where everybody can see the time, but no one can get to the clock in order to change the time. Says Rav Hutner that that's really what Moshe Rabbeinu is asking for over here. He's asking for somebody who's going to be able to be above the people, but not so far above the people that there won't be any connection between them, that the people won't be able to relate to what's going on. I was once approached. There was a group of families in London who wanted to establish a shul. They wanted to establish their own community. And they wanted me to go through the list of criteria that they'd made for the rabbi that they were looking for in order to lead their community. So I read through this thing over here. It was a very nice list, but it wasn't a list which had any kind of a concept of a rabbi. What they were looking for was someone who was going to be more of a peer to them, someone who was going to be more of a friend to them. I told them that. I said, this is not going to help the community grow. The rabbi of the community needs to be somebody who's above the community, somebody who's going to be able to draw the community up towards him. Not somebody who lives within the community, who's one of the community. That's not the way that it's going to work. It's not going to function properly. Did they listen to me? Of course not. They went and they got themselves a rabbi who was a real nice guy. He really was. but he was very ineffectual as a rabbi, because he was a little bit like the clock that was too low down on the tower, because everybody was coming along and saying, hey, Rabbi, can I do this? And he would say, well, not really, and then they went and did it anyway, because he didn't have enough authority over there. I once read the most incredible story. One of the greatest rabbis in the previous generations, somebody called the Ponevezher Rav Yosef Shalom Kahneman, established the Ponevezher Yeshiva. It was a yeshiva in a place called Ponevezher in Eastern Europe. And then when he came to Israel during the Second World War, he re-established the yeshiva over here. He said that he once put in, before he became the Ponevezher Rav, before he became the Rosh Yeshiva of that incredible yeshiva of Ponevezh, he once put in he was learning somewhere else, and he put in his candidacy to become the rabbi of the city that he grew up in. I can't remember its name. And he never heard back from them, which in those days was, that was a rejection, right? If they didn't want you, they didn't bother telling you. So he said after he became the Ponevezher Rav, after he became the Rosh Yeshiva in Ponevezh, he was once at a very high-powered collection of, leaders, communal leaders in Eastern Europe, and he happened to sit next to the community leader of the city that he came from. So he said to him, look, he says, I don't bear any ill feelings, I really don't. He says, but tell me, he says, why did you people not want me to be the rabbi of the city? So the fellow said a very interesting thing. He said, you should know. He says, everybody wanted you. The problem was that we couldn't get out of our minds the picture of you as a 7-year-old kid playing marbles in the streets. What's the problem? The Ponevezher Rav was renowned for being one of the most brilliant people in his generation. He was the most astonishing Talmud Chacham, he was the most astonishing Talmud scholar, he was the most astonishing posek. He could rule on every single dimension of Jewish law. He was approachable, he was warm, he was everything you could possibly imagine. What was the problem though? In that city, they remembered him like a little kid. And even though now he was a Ponevezher Rav, it wouldn't make any difference. They would still relate to him like that little kid that he was. And that's why they felt that it wasn't a good idea to take him. There's something to it, there really is. It's an Indian. I was once asked to put in my candidacy to become the rabbi of the shul that I grew up in. Shul in London, it's a great shul, it's very big, it's got lots of families, like 1,400 families, it's enormous, and it's got tremendous potential in there. Very little disagreement, very little arguments over there. It's a very nice community. But I wouldn't do it. Because I remembered that story from the Ponevezher Rav, whenever I used to go back and I used to give a shir over there, and it could be a really good shir, it really could have been. It could have been a great class. And invariably somebody would come up to me, they would pinch me on my cheek and tell me they remember what a lobus I was when I was a kid, like what a naughty boy I was. It's true, I was. But you know what? I'm not a naughty boy anymore. Now I'm a naughty adult instead. But it's like I would have had the most incredible handicap going back over there into a community where no one was going to take me too seriously because I grew up over there. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu was saying over here. Moshe Rabbeinu was saying that whoever it is, it's got to be somebody who's relatable to the people. It's got to be somebody who the people are going to look up to, but somebody who the people feel that they can reach as well. Right? A kanoi, a zealot, is somebody who's too far ahead. He's so far ahead that the people don't see the connection anymore, and that's not good. And that's what Moshe Rabbeinu is saying over here. And what's fascinating is the language that Moshe Rabbeinu uses. Why does Moshe Rabbeinu say that the Jewish people shouldn't be like a flock without a shepherd? Why doesn't he say to God that the Jewish people shouldn't be like a nation without a leader? That's what he's asking for, isn't it? But Moses is being very, very careful with his imagery. He's being very careful. A flock without a shepherd. You know what a shepherd does? A shepherd doesn't necessarily need to be concerned about his flock. Flocks of sheep look after themselves. But the shepherd's got to be concerned about every individual sheep within the flock. That's why there's a very famous story. I mentioned this a little while ago, I think, but there's a very famous story where Moshe Rabbeinu, when he was looking after his father-in-law's flocks, and one sheep ran away, one lamb ran away, And Moshe Rabbeinu left all the other sheep. He left the flock by itself, and he went he went running after this sheep over there. So ask the Sfas Emes, one of the great Hasidic Rebbes, the second Rebbe from Gur. He says, it doesn't seem to make any sense, does it? If you've got a flock, let's say you got a flock of 1,000 sheep, and one sheep goes wandering off. So surely it makes more sense for the shepherd to carry on looking after 999 sheep and making sure they're safe, instead of leaving them by themselves and going off to find one sheep that's gone wandering off. But says the Sfas Emes, no, because the nature of sheep in a flock is that they'll look after themselves. But a sheep by itself, there's no way it's going to be able to survive. And says the Sfas Emes that one of the great dimensions of Moshe Rabbeinu was his ability to be able to relate to each person within inside of the Jewish people, to be concerned for each person within inside of the Jewish people. And that's why, if you take a look, the great leaders of the Jewish people were all shepherds. Avram was a shepherd, Yitzchak was a shepherd, Yaakov, Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, Moshe was a shepherd, Joseph was a shepherd, King David was a shepherd. It's one of the Chazal, the sages say that being a shepherd is one of the lessons that a person has that teaches them how to become a leader. After you've learned how to lead sheep, then you can lead human beings. How to be concerned about each one. The Gemara goes as far as saying that King David, as a shepherd, he was so concerned about his sheep that he had them split up into 3 different groups, and each one was given the kind of grass that would be good for them to be able to eat. So, softer grass, the harder grass, each one according to its own group. It's an incredible thing, right? The idea of understanding that each person is their own individual. That's a sign of true leadership. True leadership is somebody who is prepared to stand up and say, this person over here needs something different from that person over there. That's why I tell you, be'emes like this, communism's a very beautiful idea, it really is. It's just not a practical idea. Right? The idea of everybody having the same so that there should be no jealousy amongst everybody, it really is a very beautiful idea. And if you ask me, only a Jew could have come up with it. Karl Marx, of course, was Jewish. Only a Jewish head could have come up with this idea of some kind of utopian existence where no one's going to be jealous of anybody else. But it doesn't work like that. Because we're all individuals and we're all different and we don't all need exactly the same. Everyone needs to have what they need in order to be able to enhance their potential, in order to make them reach the point where they're able to draw higher and grow greater than they would have done otherwise. That's not done with everybody having the same and everybody being the same, because if that were the case, then we wouldn't need all these people in the world. That's what leadership is all about. Leadership is recognizing the strengths and the weaknesses inside of other people. Verse number 18. Vayom Hashem Moshe, Kach lecha Yoshua bin Nun. We understand. Moshe Rabbeinu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu understands exactly what Moshe Rabbeinu is saying. And he says to him, there's one person who is absolutely worthy to take over from you. Kach lecha Yoshua bin Nun, ish asher ruach boy. This fellow Joshua, what is special about him? He has a special spirit within inside of him. And you should put one hand on his head. Now, you should know that Chazal say, the sages say, that when Moshe Rabbeinu came to ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to appoint a leader over the Jewish people that was going to take his place, he was really asking for one of his own children to take the position. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe Rabbeinu, even though he doesn't say it, the words are not spoken out, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling Moshe Rabbeinu that leadership is not necessarily dynastic. Which means that leadership is something which, if the son is worthy to take over, then the son should take over. We see, for example, the high priesthood. Very often the son of the high priest would take over as the high priest from his father. But only if he was worthy to do so. If he wasn't worthy to do so, then it would be given over to somebody else. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling Moshe Rabbeinu, it's true. Maybe one of your sons could have taken over here, but we've got somebody who's even better qualified than your sons are, And if the only thing that we're concerned about over here is what? Is that there should be leadership which is going to be able to function properly, then surely the most important thing is to put the most qualified person in place and not somebody who just happens to be the son of. Who is that person? That person is Yoshua. And you appoint him in front of everybody. The whole of the community has to see, the whole of the Jewish people have to see that Joshua is being appointed to be the leader after Moshe. V'nasata mohoitcho alav, you're going to bring your glory onto him. Leman yishmu kol hadas b'nei Yisrael, in order that the Jewish people should be able to see, right? The Jewish people should be able to understand that Yoshua has been divinely appointed. ולפני אלעזר הכהן יעמוד ושאל לו במשפט האורים לפני השם, על פיו יצאו ועל פיו יבואו, הוא וכל בני ישראל איתו וכל העדה. What is his function going to be? He's going to take the Jewish people out, he's going to bring the Jewish people back, exactly like Moshe Rabbeinu said. That's interesting. What did HaKadosh Baruch Hu tell him to do? HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him to put one hand on top of Yoshua's head in order to show that he's passing over as a transference of authority. So Moshe did what he was told. And he brings him in front of all the people. And he puts both his hands on his head. There's a wholehearted transference as far as Moshe Rabbeinu is concerned. A wholehearted transference of power from himself to Yoshua. Not one hand, two hands. Which means that the Jewish people are watching over here the most astonishing thing. They're watching Moshe Rabbeinu completely selflessly giving everything that he's got, giving it over to Yoshua. So listen to this.
God say to put
one hand.
Right. So why did Moshe do two?
So one hand would be enough to transfer authority from Moshe to Yoshua. Two hands is Moshe Rabbeinu completely wholeheartedly, belev shalem, he's giving over the entire authority. He's showing that he bears no ill feeling towards Yoshua, that if God says Yoshua is the right person to lead, then Yoshua is the right person to lead. There's no questions over here by Moshe. Question over here is, what does Yoshua have that the other people don't have? The Torah says that he had a special spirit inside of him. What is that special spirit? So the Gemara itself says that what made Yoshua special from everybody else was that he never left his Rabbi alone. He never left Moshe Rabbeinu alone. To the point where when Moshe Rabbeinu went up Har Sinai for 40 days and 40 nights the first time to receive the two tablets of stone with the 10 commandments on them, Yoshua pitches his tent at the foot of Har Sinai so that he won't miss a moment of being together with his teacher when he comes down the mountain. Yoshua's got this incredible relationship with Moshe Rabbeinu. Says the Gemara like this, that when the Jewish people saw that Yoshua was taking over from Moshe Rabbeinu, they said like this. It says that the Zkanim, the leaders of the Jewish people, they said like this: Moshe kepnei chama. Moshe is like the sun. Yoshua kepnei levana. Yoshua is like the moon. And then it says, Oy lanu le'eza busha, Oy lanu le'eza chlima. What a disgrace. So the vast majority of the Mefarshim and the commentaries, they understand the Gemara like this. You know, you can't compare the sun to the moon, right? The amount of light that the sun gives compared to the moon is immeasurable. So when the Jewish people see that they've got a Moshe Rabbeinu who's like the sun, and the next leader of the Jewish people is going to be the moon, so they say this, I guess, pun intended, but this reflects terribly on the Jewish people. Look at the levels that we slipped down from. We had a sun, and now we have a moon. It's a disgrace. The Chofetz Chaim has the most incredible idea over here. Most incredible chiddush. Tell me, what's special about the moon?
It reflects from the sun keeps on shining.
The moon has no source of light of its own, right? All it does is reflect the light from the sun.
Luminance, isn't it luminance?
You can call it whatever you want, right? It's one of the two great luminants, right, in the sky. But speaking physically, the moon itself has got no light whatsoever, but rather it just reflects the light from the moon, from the sun. I'm sorry. Says the Chofetz Chaim like this. They know that they're never going to have another Moshe Rabbeinu. They know that. Moshe Rabbeinu is a one-off in history. There's never going to be another Moshe Rabbeinu. The Rambam says in one of the 13 Principles of Faith that there never was anyone like Moshe. There never will be anyone like Moshe. It's finished. Moshe is, there is another, there'll never be another Moshe. The Rambam writes that even the Mashiach will be ke Moshe. If you know anything about Hebrew, ke means like, but not exactly. Similar to. Which is Moshe Rabbeinu is unique, absolutely unique. Says the Chofetz Chaim, if you've got a son, that's Moshe Rabbeinu, then who is going to be the very best person to take over Moshe Rabbeinu after he passes away, after he's no longer there? Surely somebody who represents the moon, no? Because what does the moon do? Reflects the sun. Which means that the light that Moshe brought into the world, the Torah that Moshe brought into the world, is Torah that's being reflected through Yehoshua. You hear the idea? Says the Chofetz Chaim that there's nothing more apt than having Yehoshua take over from Moshe, because Yehoshua himself does nothing more than reflect everything that Moshe brought into the world. So far, so good. Says the Chofetz Chaim, but if that's the case, why does it say, Oy lanu la'eza busha, oy lanu la'eza chlimu? What is the disgrace of it? Quite the opposite. This is something which is very apt, something which is very correct. So explains the Chofetz Chaim like this. This is the most incredible idea. Explains the Chofetz Chaim that the Zekanim, the elders, they look at Yehoshua now and they say, hold on a second. 40 years ago, we were smarter than Yehoshua. We were sharper than Yehoshua. We were bigger Talmud scholars than Yehoshua was. How did this happen? Where did this happen that Yehoshua eclipsed us? He overtook us. So the answer is that Yehoshua did something that the others didn't do. Yehipshat, it's not that Moshe chose Yehoshua and Yehoshua never left his side because Moshe insisted that Yehoshua be there, but rather what? Yehoshua chose not to leave Moshe Rabbeinu's side. And like the sages say, he would get up 5 minutes earlier in the morning and make sure that the learning hall was ready for everybody. And he would stay 5 minutes later after everything was over in order to tidy everything up. Says the Chofetz Chaim, listen to what he says. An extra 5 minutes a day invested in spiritual aspirations can turn mediocrity into something which is immeasurable. Yeah? You want to become a star? We all want to become stars, right? Everybody wants to be special. Everybody wants to be the best at whatever they are, right? The Chofetz Chaim is saying that to become the very best Jew that you can possibly be requires an investment of what? Another 5 minutes a day. That's all it is. And you can transfer, you can turn something which is average, an average approach to my connection with God, and you can turn it into something which is, you can't compare, it's incomparable. By just dedicating another 5 minutes a day to spiritual pursuits, it could be anything. It could be learning something. It could be getting involved in some kind of a chesed, some kind of a kindness that you do every day. It could be anything. But that's how we grow. We grow through consistent growth. Not to be happy with where we've reached, not to be happy with where we've got to. You can be proud of where you've got to. You can be proud of what you've achieved, but never be content. Your spiritual aspirations have to be elastic. I tell you the truth, in the same way that for the vast, vast majority of people, and I would hazard a guess for everybody here in this room, it's true with our materialistic aspirations as well, right? Everybody has materialistic aspirations. So when you've got $50 in your bank account, you want to have $1 million. But when you start getting close to having $1 million in your bank account, so believe me, your aspirations are going to start moving outwards. Right now, you're going to want to have $2 million. I read not very long ago. I don't know how many people. I don't know what you have in the bank and what you don't have in the bank. But to me, $1 million sounds like a lot of money. Are we agreed on that? Yeah. Does $1 million sound like a lot of money? And if there's anyone here who says that it doesn't sound like a lot of money, so give me $1 million, because it's not a lot of money, right? In America, they did a study not very long ago that millionaires, in order to feel financially stable, need to have a minimum of $7 million. Tell me what's the difference between $1 million and $7 million. No, tell me. Huh? Don't be so pedantic. Although I'm pleased to see that you worked that one out. That's good. None of the others did, right? Speaking psychologically, what's the difference between $1 million and $7 million? I think the only difference between the two is how much you've got. Nachama, right? We're all sitting here in this room, we're wondering ourselves, that can't be, right? If you've got $1 million, you're rich. For sure you're rich, no? You're what's called a millionaire. It's the people that have $1 million up to 7 million or up to 6 million, they're the ones that don't feel financially stable. You hear? It's all to do with aspirations. It's all to do with perspective. It's all to do with which side of the $7 million are you standing on? Or which side of the $1 million are you standing on? I had a Talmud many years ago. Most incredible fellow, he really was. He came from Russia. It's the most incredible story. He came from Russia. He was different from everybody else. You know, back in the 80s, Brezhnev, there was a window of opportunity where he allowed a lot of Jews to leave Russia. So this fellow left together with all the other thousands upon thousands of Jews that left to go to America. The difference between him and everybody else was that all the others were completely destitute. They led a life of absolute poverty. His father was the managing director of an enormous plant just outside of Moscow. He said they lived a life of absolute luxury. Communism, right? Everybody's equal. It's just that some people are a little bit more equal than others, that's all. He said they had an enormous mansion. They had a summer place on the Black Sea. They had chauffeur-driven limousines. They got to shop in all the shops that the regular Russians weren't allowed to shop in. He said he had everything except for one thing. He wasn't allowed to. They weren't free. And he said when Brezhnev opened the doors, he left together with everybody else. Now there was a law, when you left, you could only leave with $50. So he had $50 in his pocket. And he gets to America. Huh? Now you imagine. Every American's dream is to be a millionaire, right? He wanted to make $1 million. That's what he wanted. And he got involved in selling vacuum cleaners, like door-to-door sales, traveling salesman. If you met this fellow, you would understand he was so successful. He was winning, year after year, he was winning bonuses, and the best employer of the year after year. This guy he could sell anything to anybody, I'm telling you. Anyway, he was in a certain area in America. One day he gets a call that the fellow from the New York area has got sick, and could he take over? So he took over the New York area, and he ended up in Brooklyn. This guy's Jewish. He doesn't know that he's Jewish. I mean, he knows that he's Jewish. He doesn't know anything about being Jewish. Anyway, he knocks on a door on one of the houses in Brooklyn, and his frum Orthodox fellow opens the door, and he starts his pitch, and the fellow says, I don't need a vacuum cleaner. So he pitches again. He doesn't get anywhere. But the fellow tells him, listen to me. I have a stockbroking firm. He says, if you ever change your line of work and you want to go into stockbroking, he says, give me a call. He says, I need people like you. Good. He went back to selling vacuum cleaners, then he got married. And his wife was very unhappy with his lifestyle because he was on the road for over half the year. He was on the road. So they decided we're going to settle down. They decided we're going to settle down in New York. So he phones up this fellow. He kept his card. He phones up this fellow and says, can he come by? So he took an interview. He started working as a stockbroker for this fellow. And he was working crazy hours. He told me. He said he was working 18 hours a day. He said if he could have worked 24 hours a day, he would have done it. He says, the markets open in America, and when they close in America, they open in Asia. When they close in Asia, they open in Europe, and then they open in America. He said he could have done it 24 hours. If it was physically possible, he would have done it. He said he had a little girl at home, and he had his wife, and he was earning fistfuls of money. And he said that his wife was going mad because he was never home. And he kept telling his wife, when I got $1 million in the bank, that's it. I'll retire. We're talking in the 80s, right? I'll retire and everything will be great. So it's 1987. What day was it? Black Friday, Black Tuesday, October, whatever black day it was. The markets crashed and everything went, there were days of complete and absolute chaos. He says he goes into work, doesn't know where he's supposed to start. The markets are completely and absolutely in a state of complete and absolute chaos. He says the first thing he decides to do is to look at his own portfolio to see what's happened to him. So he says he looks at his portfolio and he sees that before the markets crashed, he had $1.1 million. He said he never even knew he had them. He was working so hard. And he was working so many hours, and he was accumulating all this wealth, and he said he never even knew that he had it. And he said after the crash, he was left with exactly $100,000. He lost $1 million. Now, listen to this story. This is something unbelievable. What would we all have done if we would have been in his position? What would we have done? Start reinvesting, right? Got to get going. Got to pick ourselves up. Something's got to be done. I got to get that $1 million back. You know what he did? He wasn't the least bit religious. Nothing. He said, but he saw that as a sign from God because he said that all he needed was $1 million, and then he was going to retire, and he had the $1 million, and he didn't even know about it. He said he saw it as a sign from God, and he said on the spot he decided that he was going to come to Israel and he was going to learn about Judaism. He goes to his boss, and he tells his boss this is what he's decided. So his boss says to him, how much money have you got left? He says, $100,000. He says, you're never going to be able to do it. It won't work. So listen to this. His boss, an Orthodox Jew, what did he tell him? He says, I'll support you. You commit to going to Israel for a year together with your wife and your kid, and I'll support you whilst you're there. I'll take care of all of your expenses. You go. Can you believe this? This is his best salesman. And he came over here. And he started learning. He came here and his wife went to Osamach's sister institution in Har Nof called Neve Yerushalayim. And he stayed here for a year. This was before internet. And it was before, communications were easy. And he told me on many occasions during the year how hard it was for him to be completely disconnected from the financial world. But he stuck it out. And he said he went back and they went to live in a frum neighborhood. And he said he works pretty hard today, but he never works the kind of hours that he was working before. It's the most incredible thing, right? Sometimes we don't even realize what blessings God has given us. We don't even know what blessings God has given. We're so busy, we're so caught up in just trying to move forwards more and more and more. We don't even realize what it is that we've got. There's a lesson over here, there really is. There's nothing wrong with having aspirations. There's nothing wrong with wanting to have materialistic aspirations, and there's nothing wrong with having spiritual aspirations as well. What we've got to do is we've got to learn, first of all, how to channel them so that they become what they need to become. Judaism, in contradistinction to other religions in the world, has no problem with people being mega wealthy. None whatsoever. Make tens, hundreds of millions of dollars. There's nothing wrong with it at all. of course, when you do that, so just remember your favorite rabbi, right? Yeah. I'll give you my bank account details, and you can just, we don't have to be in contact, you can just remember me, right? Says the Torah, you can be humongously wealthy, but you gotta know what to do with your wealth, but you gotta help out other people. Know how to help out other people, know when to help out other people. That's what it's all about. Giving over to others. One of the signs of leadership is the ability to sacrifice from yourself in order to be able to give to others. If a person remains inside of their own self-contained bubble, well, that's not going to get them very far. Leadership that Moshe Rabbeinu is describing over here is somebody who's going to be able to relate to those that are coming to him. You know that the Rabbi said the most incredible thing. We're all waiting for the Mashiach. Mitzvah Hashem, the Messiah should come. He should come very, very soon, right? If not sooner than that. You're supposed to say amen when you hear things like that. Okay, good, right? The say the sages. Do you know anything at all about the Mashiach's pedigree? The Mashiach's pedigree is pretty awful. It really is. It begins with Lot, who had an incestuous relationship with his daughters. It then moves on to Yehuda and Tamar, who Yehuda has I don't know, is it an incestuous relationship when you have relations with your daughter-in-law? Is that incest? I don't think it is technically, but it's not recommended, that's for sure, right? It then moves on to Boaz and Ruth, some very strange relationship over there, and then it moves on to King David and Bathsheba, very famous relationship, which was, all kinds of, it's incredible. Say the sages, why on earth would the Mashiach have a pedigree which is quite so, what are we going to call it? Non-illustrious. It's kind of very dark, it's very murky. Explains the sages the most incredible idea that the Mashiach has to be able to relate to everybody. From the greatest sinner all the way up to the greatest tzaddik, the greatest righteous person. Inside of the Mashiach's DNA, his spiritual DNA, is all kinds of murky business over there it's really not good. Lots of things over there that are really not good, in order to allow the Mashiach to be able to understand what leads people to sin. You hear? Everybody has the power and the potential to be a leader of some kind or another. Maybe not a leader like Moshe Rabbeinu. Maybe not a leader like Joshua. But to be a leader inside of your own family unit, to be a leader inside of your community, to be a leader inside of your work unit, to be upstanding, to be ethical, to be good, to be kind, to be thoughtful, to take other people into account. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, who was probably the greatest halachic authority, the greatest authority in Jewish law from the previous generation. He was once approached by, he was renowned for his humility, he was renowned for his modesty. He was once approached, a father came to him, this is one of my all-time favorite stories, a father came to him with his little boy. The little boy wasn't growing physically. And he wanted Rav Moshe Feinstein to give the boy a blessing. Rav Moshe Feinstein was 5 foot tall.
Not even that.
Maybe not even that. He was very short. And the father comes asking him to give a blessing that his child should grow. So we're not going to talk about the crass insensitivity of the father over here. But the reaction of Rav Moshe was something incredible. He gave the kid a pinch on his cheek. And he told the father, he said, "Don't worry." He says, "I know some small people that became big." Yipchan. We have to learn how to become big. What does it mean to become big? To take other people into account, to think about other people, to be a little bit more flexible, a little bit more gentle, a little bit more thoughtful. And of course, to continue growing inside of our Jewish identity and to continue drawing closer to God, for sure. We combine the two together. That's where leadership comes from, and that's exactly what the Torah is describing to us over here. Good. We're going to stop over here.